Over the past few months, the church, once seen as a staunch ally of President William Ruto's administration, has become one of its fiercest critics, citing issues such as broken campaign promises, high taxation, corruption, and a failure to address the everyday struggles of ordinary Kenyans. The National Council of Churches of Kenya, the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, the Anglican Church of Kenya, the Catholic bishops, and prominent pastors have all raised their voices, with some urging Kenyans to reject political donations, which they say are rooted in stolen taxes. On the show, we'll discuss the role of the church in holding leaders accountable, the ongoing criticism of the government, and what the church envisions for the future of Kenya. My name is Kennedy Kimani, and to help us unpack these pressing issues, I am now joined in studio by the Presiding Bishop of Christ is the Answer Ministries, Reverend Calisto Odede. Bishop, thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Kennedy, for inviting me on the program.
All right. Now, of late, the church has been so vocal in calling for accountability from the Kenya Kwanza government. But first, before we talk about this, it's good to understand how we came to this place. What do you think, or why do you think, rather, the church was so pivotal in President William Ruto's rise to power?
I would not put it only as a church event that really brought the president to power. I do think that president marketed himself as a Christian and did market himself quite widely to the churches as a believer in the Lord, and subsequently a number of Christian ministers who ran on the principle that perhaps if you have a Christian in State House as the president, then the country will be run on Christian principles. Some of them, unfortunately, went ahead and even prophesied his leadership, that this is ordained of God, and I do not contend that. But what that meant, therefore, is that I think the misconception that sometimes would arise in a number of us clergy, that we need more Christians in politics rather than more Christianity. Now, when we talk of we need more Christians, a person who calls himself Christians will take him to give him office based on the virtue that they have said they are Christians. But when I talk of needing more Christianity, it simply means the principles by which they live with, by which they operate, are Christian principles. Because if we do so, then I think I like to just point out there's a point in which we are confusing the politics of God with the politics of man. What do I mean by that? I mean, we are thinking that God operates on the same politics like the political parties of Kenya. But God operates above human politics. And so if we are supporting a candidate, then we need to be cautious that as church leaders, we also have members of our churches who belong to very different countries. So he did come to office riding on the principle, marketed himself as a Christian, and various church leaders bought into that and felt this is one of our own. If he comes into the office, we will actually have Christian principles leading the nation, which will lead us into a very, very good kind of a nation.
You've talked about some of the pastors and men of God prophesying, about the Ruto presidency. Now that they are saying, we wish we knew, what do you make of the prophecies that they made at that time?
I think the Bible gives us a kind of guideline on how to vet prophecies, and prophecies is one of those gifts that the Bible says actually should be vetted, that if one has prophesied, that it should be put into the radar with scripture and compared and seen, does it fulfill scripture? And one of those is guidelines is that has the prophecy become true? That will determine whether it was actually a true or a false prophet, whether it was actually determined by God. Sometimes we confuse our own human feelings and wishes with the voice of God. So we think because this is what I think God would want, we begin speaking on behalf of God when it may not actually be God. was given that particular word. And I do suspect a number of us spoke from that mandate. We wish a Christian is in State House, therefore God is behind that. That's why I'm calling it confusing the politics of God with the politics of man.
All right. So the church, a section of the church, rather endorsed President William Ruto, then the deputy president. But now there has been a shift from support to criticism. I mean, what has led to that shift?
Yeah, a rather interesting shift that some people who came out openly now, and this is not all the church, because some, like myself, were very, very clear and categorical from the beginning. Do not align yourself with any political side, whether the opposition or the government. Align yourself with the principles rather than individuals or parties. Because then, if principles change, you still have the right to be able to say, we voted on this principle. You have changed the principle. But those who aligned themselves with individuals or with the political party, a number of them have now changed, because what has happened is they have shifted now to principles, which should have undergirded them. And the principles were principles of honesty and speaking the truth, principles of lack of oppression among the people. And what they have seen is that as the Kenya Kwanza government has continued to give leadership, taxations have increased, therefore leading to high economic standard of living. There's been a very strong oppression of dissenting voices, that anyone who seems to have been a critic, including the Gen Zs, the young people who came out and they seem to be opposing the finance bill that the government had put up, they're being seen as enemies of the state, enemies of the people, when actually they are voicing concerns that the wider country would have. So as a result of that, there have been abductions, there have been disappearances, there have been killings, and killings that some of them, again, I've raised my voice before and asked whose killing fields are these, when we find several bodies dumped into the same place. And those who have been abducted and have been released are actually saying it's the security agents that actually abducted them. So if it is the security agent that's abducting the people, are they also the same ones who are involved in the killings and the disappearances? As a result of that, pastors who initially had supported are beginning to now go back on the principles, principles of integrity, principles of respect of human life, sanctity of life. They're going back to principles of good governance, Chapter 6 of the Constitution of Kenya. The whole question of here we are, we've had a working, one would say NHIF, although with a few challenges. Then we are introduced to SHA and SHE. And all of a sudden, I see the images of these people who are on dialysis, standing outside Kenyatta hospitals and crying because the hospital cannot anymore support that, and knowing that this is as a result of the government. So we are, the churches are beginning to have question marks that are being raised on some of the principles that are being introduced. And then, of course, what we sometimes refer to as mega corruption issues. Some of them that seems to be are being pushed by the government. They are Dani issues that for some reason the government was pushing very, very hard on, even after people raised voices and concerns. Now, all these, if you are a Christian, a minister who's living on the principle of Christianity, will make you begin feeling, there's something wrong here. Yeah. So I think the ministers are going back to biblical principles. They are looking back and they're saying the government is not operating according to our expectation that we had initially thought.
Bishop, you've talked about the government and the stories of abductions. And recently we saw the National Council of Churches of Kenya issue a press statement, and they call on actually the government officials to stop intimidating and attempting to abduct pastors who speak out against injustices. What do you make of that?
We've been there before. We've been there in the Nyayo era during President Moi's time, when the voice of dissent was silenced. First opposition was silenced, so that there was no opposition, including creating movements that would completely neutralize any opposition. The churches remained as the only alternative voice of the people. Even the churches themselves were silenced to the extent that some ministers we know, like Alexander Muge, died under very mysterious circumstances. And this was basically to give the government a free way of having their way without any dissenting voice. Now, if the NCCK are making those statements, it means some of their pastors who are under their umbrella organizations have reported to them, this is what is happening to us when we speak negatively. We are being intimidated, we are being harassed, and we are being threatened. Now, what do I make of that? I think that's a very unwise direction to go, because the church has been given the prophetic mandate to speak on things that are touching on the nation, whether they are good or evil. Commend the good work that the government is doing, but also renounce the evil that the government is doing. And to attempt to silence the voice of the church is basically attempting to minimize their responsibility as church ministers. It is their responsibility. They need to go ahead and speak.
All right. There's an issue that actually has been brought to light, the issue of harambes or church donations. And recently saw the Catholic Church return the money that President William Ruto donated. What's your take on that?
I think that's new for the Catholic Church, because they haven't been doing that before. It's a new thing. It came after the statement that they made. My own direction and what we do in Christ is the Answer Ministry, CITAM, is that politicians are free to come to church. Politicians are free to give their offerings like everyone else is giving. That offering should be dropped in the offering basket without announcement, without letting anyone know how much it is. It is for the good of the people. In other words, your left hand should not know what your right hand is giving. And I think what the Catholic Church is doing is commendable, because in that way, we don't create a platform in church for politicians to market themselves. Because what they are doing by announcing the amount they're giving, they're basically inducing the church. It's understandable that some of our churches, particularly in the rural area, may be undergoing a lot of difficulty. So for a politician to come and give a certain amount of money that will help you buy seats or do renovation in the church, it's very difficult to refuse that. So what the Catholic Church did is very commendable.
But Bishop, some will argue that this is actually a creation of the church, because you see most of these harambes, they actually call people to even to become guests of honors, in this, and politicians actually present themselves, to be the guest of honors in these harambes. Do you think maybe it could be a creation, a problem that was created by the church itself?
I think the Harambee model of raising fund is a Kenyan issue and not just a church issue.
Yeah.
It's being done for schools, it's being done for people going for studies, it's being done everywhere, not only within the church. But I think when the church does adopt that model of fundraising, where they're saying, let's have a big gathering, let's call people together, they need to have a principle. I've attended the so-called Harambes, where no one announces what you're giving. You just go and put it in the basket because you're helping to build the church, and no one knows how much you have given. No one announces it at all. And you sit down because you're giving to God. You're not giving to man. Yeah. So I think that's the principle that the wider church perhaps should adopt.
All right. Yeah. Bishop, how justified are the church's criticism of the high taxation and unfulfilled promises of the Kenya Kwanza administration?
The impact of the high taxations, for especially those who are employed, is felt. It's felt in terms of reduced expenditure by the families. People who have had a financial commitment are crying out. The fact that part of those levies, like the housing levies, still cannot be explained why a working person should be buying a house for someone else that he will not actually occupy. And those are issues that people have been struggling with, and they are large. They are large amounts of money. They are not small amounts of money. 2.75% of one's salary is actually a very hefty amount of money. The health insurance amount if I was buying a health insurance for myself, rather than using the SHA, that amount of money will get me a very, very high health insurance in the open market. And here you are putting it in, and you are not even guaranteed of the services.
Yeah.
Countries that offer such health services, such a high taxations on health, actually offer free health services. The UK, for example, the Scandinavian countries, is free. Once you pay those safety taxes, everyone gets treated free of charge.
Yeah.
But here you do that, you still don't have free services. So I think those are the reasons why people are feeling the government is becoming oppressive when it starts getting taxes from people. And much more so when you begin hearing narrative from the open media that some of those taxes are being administered by single sourced companies that remain secretive. Then you begin questioning whether actually that money was meant for the purpose for which it was being raised. It seems that it may have been raised for a different purpose.
All right. Yeah. Bishop, in June this year, we actually saw the Gen Z go to the streets. And in July, the head of state was forced to sack his cabinet and form a new cabinet, a broad-based government. What role has the church played in shaping the current political discourse in the country? And actually, the Gen Z were saying if the church actually joined them on the streets, things would have been better. Yeah. Do you agree with that?
Actually, some of our young pastors were together with them, but I think what they wanted was the older church ministers to be with them. I spoke a day before the Gen Zs went onto the street, and something that's on YouTube, people can check on that, which, in my opinion, was a misunderstanding of the government of the young people. They really hadn't understood it. And I gave examples of countries where that has actually taken place, and there's been government which have been overturned as a result of the young people going onto the streets. Now, what's the church role in bringing about accountability in the political economy that we have right now? This falls into several categories. I think the first category is what I call the prophetic a little earlier on, where we stand out to speak on issues that are evil, issues that are not aligned with the laws of Kenya, issues that are touching on corruptions, issues that are touching on bad governance. The second is what I call diplomatic. And diplomatic is where, with some of our umbrella organizations, we've had occasions to go before the head of state and other people, senior government officials, and we are able to speak with them in the quietness of their chambers. And then we don't go to the media, we don't say anything that's we have said in public, because we've been given audience in quietness of the chambers. And I think thirdly, the church also is in a role where a number of our members are people who are involved in very, very high government and civic positions. So when they do get information, sometimes they would give the church leaders, this is what is happening in this place. And then we try to sort it out with the people who are in charge. Now, where they have refused, that's when the church would go public and begin to announce and pronounce, yes, this is what's happening in this particular place. So the church in terms of the church leaders, but also the church in terms of the widespread church members in their respective places, people who are determined to play a role of living lives of integrity.
All right. Bishop, do you believe the church's actions reflect public sentiments, whatever the church is saying right now?
From the grassroots, and the grassroots here are my congregants that I interact with. The congregants have been raising their voices concerning corruption, concerning the SHA and the SHE, concerning the taxes and the levies. And so when the church picks up this and begins to speak about it, it simply says, yes, they are voicing not their own concern as church leaders, but they are voicing what they are hearing on the grassroots levels as well.
All right.
Yeah.
And which, among the campaign promises of President William Ruto, which of Ruto's promises do you think the church feels mostly strongly about?
The president made several promises, very, very many. One of them, that issue of taxations. He made some promises on taxations that's still even on YouTube. One can check on that.
Yeah.
And then he comes around, he increases that. He made promises on fuel. When he comes in, the fuel levies would go, and immediately he comes up, the fuel goes up. So many promises on the economy. He made promises on giving monies to the hustler
Yeah.
community, which has not turned up. We may say there's a hustler funds,
Yeah.
but it's not what it what actually was said. So I do think there are many promises that were made by the president. My own view is that being maybe it should not have been outside, but being a little removed from the center of decision making at that point. He thought when he got into the center, he would be able to manipulate things and make things work out. And now that he's in the center, he's discovering it's a different ballgame. And secondly, I also think, and this one I feel strongly about, that there are some of the policies that our government is implementing that are not Kenyan policies. They are IMF or World Bank policies that have been handed down to the government. If I may say so, the government is being arm twisted so that they can actually implement certain policies that are leading us more into what we call SAPs, and we pass through that structural adjustment. It seems like some of the policies are actually leading us into that direction. And you don't get money, you don't get loan unless you do this, privatize, and on and on.
Yeah. The other day, the head of state said that a section of Kenyans, a majority of Kenyans, are so unpatriotic. And he said that in Swahili, pepo chafu, that is disturbing them, meaning evil spirits that is disturbing Kenyans. I mean, what do you take of Kenyans criticizing the government? Do Kenyans have to support everything that the government says?
No, I think the Bible recommends that, yes, Romans chapter 13, be obedient to the government of the day, but that's in as far as good is concerned. If the government of the day is committing evil, you do not align yourself with the evil. You need to be able to speak out against the evil. And this should not just be church leaders only. It should be widespread across the country.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, reading through Bible scriptures like the book of Nehemiah, I think there should be an internal anger that should arise up, a national, if I may use the words of Gen Z, a national rage because of some of the evils that are being committed, and speak out against that as a national sensitivity for the whole country.
Bishop, do you think there's any campaign promise that the government has actually achieved?
Oh, wow. That's a difficult one. Yes, I would think there are some good things that have been happening. There are attempts to change the education system. I think some of the implementations are premature. It may be working a little bit on the lower education level. It is collapsing at the university level. Collapsing, and that's our education system is actually collapsing with the new funding model that they have introduced. So at the lower level, it may be working, but at the higher level, I think it is collapsing. There needs to be a change of direction.
Do you think that the bursaries that the MPs are given should be consolidated so that it can cater for the education instead of the MPs giving bursaries to these students?
The MPs are using it as a campaign tool, but we have so many little bursaries all over the place that if they were put together and amalgamated, actually, someone the other day tried to calculate for me, we would be able to take care of the funding of our
all the way to the university level.
Yeah, the university level, that's right.
All right. When the Catholic bishops talked about, the high taxation and the direction that the country is heading to, some politicians actually came out and they spoke in churches. They say that the church or the bishops should stick to their lane. Let politicians do politics and let bishops and the men of God preach. Should the church remain politically vocal or focus on spiritual matters alone?
The people who say that do not understand what really is politics, taken from the word polis, which means the city. Politics is a guideline on how we share the same space. And it touches on how we share the resources. It touches on how we regulate ourselves and function. And there is no way a church can exist in that space when someone else is actually damaging the space. If I'm to use a phrase of a former church leader, David Gitari, who said, we are like people in one ship. And if someone in that ship has a chisel and is digging on the bottom of the ship while we are in the middle of the lake, we will all sink. So if you are in that ship and someone is doing something wrong, you have a right to actually oppose whatever wrong that they are doing. So to say the church should toe their line and stay away from politics, the Bible is a very political book. It touches on governments, it touches on political allegiances, so one cannot really believe and teach the Bible without it touching on political matters, because the Bible is very, very political. However, politics is a spectrum, and a spectrum that comes from one end is don't be engaged with politics at all. It's a dirty game. Second, you move to a level where you're saying only vote and keep away from voting. Third, you move to a level where you're saying just speak out about a few issues, and on, up to the extreme level where we have liberation theology, where you have a Bible in one hand and a gun on the other hand. Now, that spectrum, there is a middle ground which actually is very, very important. And that middle ground is the church should actually speak out on issues that are affecting their members and speak out very, very vocally. However, when it comes to joining a political party, again, there I would recommend that the church should hold their views, especially church ministers, should hold their views secretly. If you have a candidate you are supporting, hold that view secretly.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's a secret ballot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, the church really supported Ruto during the 2022 elections. But now the church and the head of state are not reading from the same script. What impact could the church criticism have on Ruto's re-election come 2027?
That's difficult to say at this juncture. It's still too early, and Kenyan politics, 1 week is a very long period of time. But one would say, from the sentiments that I'm hearing on the ground, the president has a long way to go in winning back the confidence of the church, because the church feel betrayed. He rode on the platform of Christian faith. Yeah. He gets in there and is not holding to the principles of Christian faith. So some of those that supported him have turned around, and they are feeling deeply, deeply betrayed. And as a result of that, it will take a long while for them to be won back. If they go out to speak during the campaigns for 2027, Kenya is estimated to be 80% Christian. And if they go out to speak, it means they will be impacting those 80%. It would be a hard walk in the park it will not be a walk in the park.
It will not be a walk in the park
for the president.
So how do you see the relationship between the church and the state evolving from here, moving forward?
I know there are efforts to bring the church back. Yeah. Unfortunately, sometimes the church is also divided. So there are some efforts to engage the church in conversations. But I think right now where the church is saying there are these promises that needs to be fulfilled. There are these guidelines, things that we think are important. IEBC, it's important that IEBC be in place. Why is IEBC not in place? And a number of issues that the church is saying this needs to be acted on. The taxation, the issue of the health issue, the education issue in the university, things that are affecting the whole country. And without really acting on that, I'm not too sure that the government will win back the confidence of the church that easily.
All right.
They are still our members. Yeah. As a matter of fact, let me speak out loudly here. We welcome them to church. Any Sunday, they can come and worship and pray, but they are coming as worshippers, not as politicians.
Not as politicians. There's a lot of tension between the church and the state. Can the church and the state find a common ground at this moment?
Yes, there are many spaces in which we work together with the government, and we share lots of things together, reaching out to the disenfranchised people, development issues. We work in northern part of Kenya, health issues, churches that are running hospitals and things like that. Schools, we run schools. So there are many areas where we actually would coalesce together in terms of what the church is doing and what the government is also doing. But I think it is important that in areas where we have disagreed, we need to look for some direction that would ease that tension so that people live peacefully. Otherwise, it's the responsibility of the church to speak out where there is evil going on.
All right. And Bishop, what lessons should both the church and the government learn from this standoff we are experiencing at the moment?
I think for the church, I would speak, one, it's very important that we do not let's treat politicians and political parties with a long wooden spoon that does not conduct, so that we respect them, we honor them with their responsibility, but let's not be identified with them to the extent that their sins become the sins of the church. Their evil deeds are equated to the evil deeds of the church. And we passed through that when the Gen Zs were actually talking of Occupy the Church as well, because they were equating some of the deeds of the government with the activities of the church. So I think a big lesson for us, the church needs to keep a distance. I think the best way I've heard someone put it is, it's like a fire in a cold room. Be close to the fire so that you're warm, and do not get too close, because you will be burnt. And when we get too close, we are burnt as a church. We need to keep our distance in terms of deep involvement with the church. For the government, my prayer is that they would listen to the voice of the church. Some of the issues that the church is speaking out are important, because the church is speaking on behalf of the populace. When the opposition have joined the government, there's no one else who can now speak for the people except the church.
Except the church. As you conclude, Bishop, what's your parting shot?
My prayer is that as we go ahead with the country, we have recommended this, and I think two areas. One, if there is a forum, could it be even a national forum that brings together diverse stakeholders, the church, the civil society, the government, the politicians, a selected few that can just map out what is the way forward for the nations. Secondly, I do think we may need something like what the South Africans have done. They had something they call the Unburdening Forum. The Unburdening Forum was a forum that was created, run by church leaders, where anyone who had issues that they were afraid to bring out, they could bring to these church leaders, and the church leaders would be able to raise them up with the relevant authorities in quietness, without necessarily pronouncing them out aloud. And I do think we are available as a church to form some body like that, that will help the nation move forward.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I guess that's a very good point to end our conversation tonight. Thank you so much, Bishop, for your time. That has been a Bishop, Reverend Calisto Odede, the presiding bishop of CITAM, helping us understand the whole issue of state versus church, the accountability in focus. The pressure has been mounting as the church demands accountability from the Kenya Kwanza government. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Kennedy Kimani. Enjoy the rest of our programming.